When I first told Dorothy that Steve needed a place to crash for a while, she dropped the dishcloth like it had personally offended her and gave me that look, the one that meant a negotiation was about to start whether I liked it or not. "Kirk," she said, dragging my name out like she was pulling weeds, "I love your brother, you know that, but I don't love having long-term house guests who eat all the cereal and leave socks in the living room." I leaned against the counter, arms folded, keeping my voice steady because this wasn't a battle worth losing my footing over. "He's not just dropping into freeload, Dorothy. He needs a hand right now, just for a bit, and besides, you know how Steve is. He'll pull his weight." She narrowed her eyes, the wheels turning in her head as she weighed her options. For a second, I thought she might flat out say no, but then she sighed, and that sigh told me everything I needed to know. "Fine," she said, like I was asking her to house a small bear instead of my own brother, "but if he's here longer than a month, I'm charging him rent." I chuckled and promised, because sometimes winning just means not losing outright. Steve rolled up 2 days later in that battered Ford pickup that looked like it lost a fight with a tornado, a duffel bag slung over one shoulder and a grin on his face like he hadn't just spent 6 months trying to outrun the consequences of bad luck and worse decisions. I'll give him this, he didn't come in acting like the prodigal son looking for a feast. He unpacked, asked what needed fixing around the house, and got to work without a single complaint. First the leaky faucet, then the sagging fence gate, then the upstairs toilet that hadn't flushed right since the Clinton administration. And Dorothy, who had about as much patience for freeloaders as a cat has for bathwater, started to soften around him faster than I ever thought she would. They actually started having little conversations over coffee in the mornings, talking about things like garden mulch and those cooking shows she loved, and one afternoon I came home early from work and caught the two of them laughing over some ridiculous daytime soap opera like they were old friends. For a while, life felt stable again, like a song you hadn't heard in years but still knew all the words to. Then one evening, just as the sun dipped low and the whole kitchen glowed like something out of a postcard, Dorothy set down her fork mid-dinner and gave me that look again, the one that meant she had something big to say and no good way to ease into it. "Kirk," she said, her voice catching just enough to make my heart do a somersault, "I'm pregnant." For a second, I thought I misheard her, like maybe she said present, or pungent, or something equally absurd, but when I looked into her eyes, shining and scared and hopeful all at once, I knew she meant exactly what she said. I didn't say anything right away, didn't trust my voice not to crack wide open, so instead I stood up, walked around the table, pulled her to her feet, and wrapped her in the kind of hug that says everything you don't have words for. My chest felt too small for the happiness trying to climb out of it. Steve hooted from the other room like he'd known all along, and Dorothy laughed into my shoulder, and for the first time in a long time, I realized that maybe, just maybe, things had a way of working out even after the ground under you had been shaken loose. If you are interested in the continuation, like this video and I would be grateful for your comments. New stories are published here every day. Listen to the story to the end, because what happened at the end will surprise you. Steve settled into his new life quicker than I thought possible, landing a steady job at a commercial landscaping company that paid better than decent and even got him a company truck with his name printed on the door like a badge of newfound responsibility. He called me the day he signed his lease, his voice bursting through the phone with a rare kind of pride, telling me about the apartment that overlooked the little park across from the main drag and how for the first time in years he felt like a grown man again. I was genuinely happy for him, said so too, and when he invited Dorothy and me over for pizza and to show us the place, we went without hesitation, thinking nothing more of it. Back at home, Dorothy gave birth to our son a few months later in the dead of night while the radio played some old jazz standard that, for whatever reason, has stuck in my mind ever since like it's part of the kid's origin story. He came into the world with a full head of hair and eyes that locked onto mine as if demanding I get my act together right then and there. Dorothy was exhausted but radiant, clutching my hand with a quiet fierceness that reminded me exactly why I married her. We named him Jacob, and from the second we brought him home, life shifted into something sharper, something real in a way that makes the years before feel like blurry photographs you barely remember taking. Steve was over the next day with gifts stacked so high it looked like he robbed a toy store. He held Jacob like he was holding the future itself, eyes soft, voice softer, and said over and over that he just wanted to be the best uncle he could be. At first, I didn't think twice about it. I welcomed the help because running the business while trying to be super dad wasn't exactly easy. Steve seemed eager to pick up the slack, rocking Jacob to sleep during those long fussy nights, bringing diapers before we ever asked, even showing up on weekends with new gadgets and baby swings that seemed a little excessive but helpful nonetheless. I convinced myself that family steps up, that maybe Steve finally found purpose, and I let him take more and more time with Jacob while I spent mine balancing ledgers, visiting job sites, and making sure our shop didn't fall behind. Dorothy never complained. If anything, she seemed relieved to have another set of hands. Then one evening, while the sunset painted the house in gold and my hands still smelled faintly of sawdust, my parents came over for dinner. I was in a good mood, grilled steaks ready, music low, the kind of family gathering that usually left you feeling like everything was all right in the world. They came through the door smiling, hugged Dorothy and fawned over Jacob the second they saw him bundled in his little blue blanket, but the mood shifted subtly when Steve arrived unannounced carrying a bag of fresh groceries and calling out, "Uncle's here," like he lived there. I noticed the way my mother's smile stiffened ever so slightly and how my father's eyes followed Steve like he was trying to solve a puzzle he didn't like the edges of. But me? I was too content, too blind maybe, to read the room just yet. I was just happy everyone was together, even if, looking back now, the air was heavier than I realized. The dinner started out smooth, too smooth looking back now, like a play where everyone knew their lines but something off-script hovered right behind the curtain waiting for its cue. We all sat there, laughing and passing dishes, while Jacob slept peacefully in his little bassinet by the window, his tiny fingers twitching in dreams only babies understand. Dorothy looked relaxed, chatting about nothing important, the kind of small talk that fills rooms without really saying anything at all. Steve, across from me, was in rare form, cracking jokes and pouring wine like he belonged at the head of the table instead of me. My mother kept glancing toward my father, whose face hadn't cracked even a shadow of a smile the entire evening. At first, I chalked it up to his usual stern nature, the kind that made you stand straighter just by walking into the same room. But something in his eyes wasn't cold, it was burning, simmering, waiting. And then it happened, like lightning that doesn't bother with thunder first. He set his fork down hard enough that it clattered against his plate and the entire table fell silent instantly, as though the walls themselves were holding their breath. His voice was heavy, measured, but shaking at the edges like a man holding something too long. "Dorothy, Steve," he said slowly, each name like a stone dropped into still water, "should I tell Kirk everything, or will you do it yourselves?" The entire room froze, including me. Dorothy's face drained of color so fast it was like watching paint peel in real time. Steve's grin fell right off his face, replaced by something pale and tight. My mother gasped and reached for my father's wrist like she could somehow pull the words back into his mouth, whispering his name sharply, but he only brushed her off gently and looked straight at me. "Kirk," he said, and this time there was no softness, only steel wrapped in sorrow. "I can't do this anymore. I can't sit here and smile while this lie sits between us. That child. Jacob, he's not your son. I'm sorry, son, but you deserve the truth. He's Steve's." They both knew. We knew from the moment Dorothy announced the pregnancy. The words didn't hit like a truck. No, they slid into my chest like a blade carefully twisted, slow and precise, designed not to kill but to make sure you felt every inch of betrayal. I didn't speak. I couldn't. My eyes moved from my father's haunted face to Dorothy, who was already crumbling in her chair, her lips parting like she wanted to say something but couldn't find the script. Steve couldn't meet my gaze. He stared down, hands clenched, as though he could somehow hold on to the last moment where I still thought of him as my brother. That moment, I swear, lasted forever and yet ended all at once when silence, thick as concrete, swallowed the room whole and I realized something had shattered so violently in me that I didn't even feel it yet. The room felt like it belonged to someone else, not me, as if I had stepped outside my own life and was now just watching from a distance, stuck in a body that wouldn't move fast enough to catch up to the betrayal swirling around me like smoke that refused to clear. I turned to Dorothy first because I needed to hear her voice break under the weight of her choices, needed to see if she could even explain what could never make sense. My voice came out low, controlled, like a rope pulled tight before it snaps. How, Dorothy? How could you do this to me, to us, to our family? She shook her head rapidly, tears pouring now, her hands trembling as she reached for me, but I stepped back, forcing distance like it might shield me from the venom of her confession. It wasn't supposed to happen, she sobbed, the words as pathetic as they were insulting. I didn't plan this, Kirk, it just happened. I scoffed, and it sounded nothing like me, more like a stranger mocking from behind cracked glass. Just happened? I repeated coldly. Steve was under my roof, sleeping under my protection, while I worked day and night to keep this family together. And this is how you repaid me? This is how he thanked me? Sneaking behind my back like a snake while I trusted you both? I didn't even give Steve a chance to speak first because my anger had already targeted him next. I spun toward him, my eyes drilling into his pathetic, sheepish face. You, I hissed, you, of all people. I took you in when no one else would, Steve. You had nowhere, and I gave you somewhere. I gave you food, a bed, peace. And you repaid me by stabbing me so deep I'm choking on it. Steve opened his mouth to answer, but I didn't want his words anymore. He had forfeited the right to explain the moment he crossed the line from brother to betrayer. My eyes drifted without meaning to Jacob, who lay quietly in his crib, and that was when the most bitter blade slid through my chest, because I should have seen my son and felt love, should have seen my boy and felt warmth, but all I saw now was him, Steve. The resemblance that once seemed adorable now felt like a mockery carved straight from my pain. I hated myself for it, hated how instantly I felt something sour and unforgiving stir inside me, but I couldn't stop it. He wasn't mine. He never was. I swallowed hard, my mouth dry as desert bone, and finally I spoke, loud, clear, final. Get out, I said sharply, cutting through Dorothy's sobbing and Steve's guilty silence like a blade slicing a rope. Both of you. No, all of you. My so-called family. Traitors. Every last one of you. Nobody moved right away. It was as if the room itself refused to believe what was happening, but I wasn't bluffing, not anymore. I raised my voice, harsh and unrelenting. I said, get out. I don't care where you go. I don't care what you do. But you don't stay here. Not another second. Dorothy stood slowly, shaking so hard her knees looked ready to give out. She clutched Jacob tight against her chest like she was shielding him from me, though I had no intention of laying a finger on them. Her voice broke like fragile glass as she pleaded softly, almost childlike now. Kirk, please. Where do I go? What about Jacob? Where do we go? I didn't blink. I didn't soften. Not now. Not after all this. My voice came low, flat, dead of emotion because I had none left to offer. I don't care, Dorothy. I'm tired. So tired. Take your son and figure it out. She sobbed harder, her face buried against Jacob as she shuffled toward the door. Steve didn't even try to argue. He followed silently, head low, shoulders sagging like the weight of what he'd done finally crushed him. My parents left too, eyes down, their presence now a reminder that everyone in that house had known the truth long before I did. When the door finally closed, the silence left behind wasn't peaceful. It roared. It screamed through the walls louder than any argument could have. And I just stood there in my kitchen, listening to it, feeling it eat through every piece of me that had once been whole. Days bled into nights like ink poured too heavy on paper, and I let them. I buried myself in work, in numbers, in orders, in things that didn't lie to me. The business became my only language now, something clean and simple that didn't whisper behind my back or smile while twisting the knife. I left early, came home late, barely turned on the television because even silence was better than hearing old memories echo off the walls. People asked how I was, and I gave them the usual lines. Fine. Busy. Getting through. Lies, but harmless ones, easier than dumping my story like broken glass in front of them. Months passed that way, and the more distance I put between myself and that night, the more I tried convincing myself that it was all a bad dream, something ugly that I could someday file under lessons learned and leave there forever. But, of course, life doesn't let you seal doors that easily. One cold evening, when the sky hung low and mean and the streetlights looked like they couldn't be bothered to glow properly, there was a knock on my door. I ignored it at first, figuring it was a neighbor or salesman. But the knocking came again, softer, desperate, almost apologetic. Against my better judgment, I opened it. There stood Dorothy. Her hair was tied back hastily, her face pale, eyes red-rimmed and hollow. Not the composed woman who once ruled our home with soft words and practiced grace, but someone worn down, almost brittle. She didn't wait for an invitation. Her voice came fast, shaky, slipping past every ounce of pride she once held. "Kirk, please. I just need to talk." I didn't move from the doorway. "There's nothing left to say," I said, my tone colder than I intended but exactly as cold as she deserved. She didn't flinch. Instead, she pushed forward with words that spilled like marbles on tile, impossible to gather gracefully. "I'm sorry, Kirk. I made mistakes, horrible mistakes." "Steve," I cut her off with a sharp motion of my hand. "Stop," I said firmly, each syllable like slamming a door. "I don't care about Steve. I don't care about the past. Whatever you're looking for here, Dorothy, you won't find it." Her lips trembled, but she wasn't done. "We need help," she whispered finally, and the shift from regret to request was instant and telling. "Steve got fired last month. We're living with my parents now. It's bad, Kirk. Really bad. She paused, gathering herself, just some money. To get through until things get better." For a brief second, there was a flicker of the old dynamic, her eyes pleading, expecting that same Kirk who always came through, always found a way to solve the mess. But that Kirk died the night they killed our marriage with careless whispers and stolen moments. I didn't even hesitate. "Not my problem," I said calmly, as if discussing weather forecasts. Her mouth opened, desperate, ready to bargain or shame or whatever tool she had left in her broken toolbox, but I was already closing the door. The last thing I saw was her standing there, arms crossed tightly around herself, cold in more ways than one. As the latch clicked shut, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel triumph. I felt nothing, and somehow, that was worse. But necessary. I thought I had seen the worst already. Thought betrayal was the bottom of the well. Thought watching your wife lie through her teeth and your brother smile while stabbing you in the back was about as dark as life gets. I was wrong. The worst wasn't when Dorothy begged or when Steve slithered out the door with his head down. The worst came quietly, on a gray Tuesday afternoon, delivered not in shouts or apologies but in careful, polite words typed by her parents. Their email wasn't long, but it hit like a brick through stained glass. Jacob was sick. Not a cold or some fever, but sick in the way that makes doctors talk slow and mothers cry into hospital pillows. Something rare, something cruel. He needed surgery, urgently. Expensive, complicated, no guarantees. For a moment, everything stopped. I stared at the screen like it was written in another language. My first instinct, the part of me trained for years to fix and help and carry weight that wasn't mine, almost reached for the phone. But then the cold reality snapped back like a trap closing on my foot. That wasn't my son. That boy, however innocent and unaware, came from betrayal. He came from the night my wife closed the bedroom door behind my back and decided her desires meant more than our vows. He came from my brother's weakness and her selfishness. My hands clenched the edge of my desk so hard I could feel the wood strain beneath my fingers. Still, I hesitated. Then came the next wave. My parents, standing at my door as if summoned by guilt itself. My mother's eyes already swollen, her voice soft and breaking as she begged me to reconsider. "Kirk, please. He's just a child. He didn't ask for this. He's innocent in all of it." My father stood stiff beside her, silent, but even his stern mask had cracks now. I listened, truly listened, and still my answer didn't change. I shook my head slowly, refusing to let emotion override reason this time. "No," I said, and there was no anger in my voice anymore. Only tiredness that ran so deep I felt hollow just speaking. "He is not my child. He never was. They made their choices. They can live with them." My mother cried, clinging to my father as he guided her away, but I didn't follow, didn't watch them leave. I simply closed the door quietly, like shutting out a cold wind that had overstayed its welcome. Later that night, my phone buzzed again. It was Dorothy. No words at first, just a photo. Jacob in a hospital bed, tubes and machines humming like grim lullabies, his tiny face pale but still impossibly familiar. Underneath, just a short sentence. "This is your last chance. He will die." I stared at it for a long time. Longer than I care to admit. Something sharp twisted inside my chest, something dangerously close to pity or sorrow, and for a single breath, I felt the tear slip from my eye. Not for them. Not for Dorothy. Not even fully for the child. But for what should have been, what could have been, if this story had been written without betrayal inked into every page. Still, clarity returned fast and brutal. No matter what Jacob needed, I knew what I didn't owe. I didn't owe Steve another stolen ounce of myself. I didn't owe Dorothy another favor wrapped in regret. And most of all, I didn't owe the universe a chance to bind me again to a life they destroyed. I wiped the tear away, deleted the message, and powered my phone off. Then I sat in the dark, alone but at peace, and whispered to no one but myself, "Not my child. Not my problem. Not anymore." Write in the comments, what would you do in this situation?